Hello, and welcome to our very serious podcast for ProTeam University. We're here today with familiar faces, myself and Mike, who we've been on together for two of our other prior podcasts, focusing on performance, injury prevention, all the great topics that ProTeam Tactical focuses on with the different agencies we work with. But we're really excited about today's episode because we have how many years in the making? Career firefighter of
12 years-ish.
decade plus. It sounds fancier.
Sure.
And worn a number of hats for Zionsville Fire Department. PFT, oversaw the PFT program, most recently elevated to
Deputy Chief of Operations.
Yeah, so has done a lot of different things for his department and well integrated into the fire world. But we still are going to focus the topic globally or broadly on just tactical first responder wellness with Aaron's expertise, especially when we get into the discussion about structuring academy PT and exercise programming. But we do have a couple topics we just want to hit on, but as we've always done it, Mike and I are pretty informal. And so chime in, change topics. We like to take left turns and have squirrel moments. So it can definitely happen that way because we like to have fun with it too. And our audience listening in gets a good kick out of it. But the first thing that goes along with the theme of what Mike and I have been talking about the last couple episodes is normalizing movement assessment or pre-screening metrics for injury prevention and why that's important. And I think my curiosity for you, living in the positions you've been in the world you're in, would you say that that is something that is commonplace to like pre-screen firefighters for movement?
No.
Okay.
It is not. Not at all.
Not at all. Great. Is it something more commonplace now, though, maybe? Or
we're getting there.
That way?
Yes.
Okay.
We're finally getting the cart on the path, if you will.
Yeah.
It used to be, can you pass a CPAT? Okay, great. We'll put you in the academy. Or now the focus is going more towards, let's actually see what your strengths, what your weaknesses are, and let's start tailoring what we're going to do to that. So I wouldn't say we're there yet. We haven't crossed the finish line, but at least the cart is getting onto that path of, okay, let's identify, I don't want to say problem areas, but areas that we need to improve and work towards that in the academy setting.
And I kind of have a two-part follow-up to that. So with it becoming more normal, is that within Zionsville or is that within the what local are you guys? 4416?
No, we're 5195 in Boone County.
In Boone County, I knew that. But like normal at the IAFF level, like what level of normalcy is that happening?
I can't speak really to the union side. I can say we run in a joint academy with all of the Boone County fire departments that are career. I shouldn't say all because there's one that doesn't participate, but within our academy that's also integrated with Westfield Fire that's 4416. That yes, it is starting to make that transition. I can't really speak to the international level, but definitely at our level as far as locally, Boone County, Hamilton County, it's starting to become part of what we do.
And I, with my experience working on the fire side of the house, I would say that Indiana is pretty far ahead with that kind of mentality when you look at like the rest of the United States.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like
Absolutely.
pretty progressive.
Yep.
Just having been to the recent FDIC and having conversations with departments from all over, you
Yeah.
know. So
it's new. It's new school, if you will. And firefighters don't like change, but also don't like the way it is. So we got to find that nice equal medium of easing into it, not just diving head first.
So my follow-up question to that is, why is it so important to head that way?
It's one of those that running numerous academies with PT and conditioning and everything else that goes along with it. We're at least starting to see a trend now of less injuries, more recruits not missing out on class days, or if they miss out, it's for a lot shorter period. But also the big part is capitalizing on their strengths. So if the class as a whole needs to improve one thing, but then they all are doing well in a different category, whatever that may be, we know that we can really capitalize on that and make that a highlight as far as more repetition of it, rather than if it's something that's a weakness and we just keep attacking and not doing anything for it, we're going to lead down the path to injury, which is one of those for us that last time we won is a recruit getting injured because they missed 3 or 4 days of an academy, and really it's hard to make it up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the big push is for us is if they're injured, great, let's get them treated, hopefully get them right back into class within the next day or two. If they miss more days than that, that's whenever the tough decisions have to come of, okay, well, maybe we can't keep them in this class, got to look for a different class later on whenever they're healed.
And that is no different than the law enforcement side, at
Yeah.
least in the experience that I've had working at my location with IMPD, that there was a huge trend in just the difference of um, recycles last class to the recycles we have this class. And the difference, I think, the intervention that was there in the last class was a pre-screen. In this class, just manpower, more people, and more recruits coming in, which is good, but like maybe not as much help on the back end to monitor the screening process prevented them from doing it that this class. And so I think we kind of missed some things, and it happens
Yeah.
with the amount of time that you have. But also, I think that's maybe a barrier that some people think like, man, how much time does it take to do these screens that could prevent X, Y, and Z from happening? And Mike has talked about, like, I don't know, 3 minutes tops.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might not just be comfortable with it.
Right. I mean, again, the job as a firefighter or police officer is not to be a movement specialist. That's not what your job is. But there are ways to do that fast, right? You have 150, 100 people in your academies. You're going to need to do something quick. Maybe it's just, can they reach overhead? Can they touch their hands behind their back? Can they do a basic squat? All those basic things that help them. And you can get some good information on that to be able to program. And like you said, take advantage of their strengths. No one wants to go into an academy and go, man, you suck at this, or you're bad at this.
Right.
Right. I don't want to do
Right.
that. And I don't want you to tell me how much I suck every day. That's terrible.
Right.
But if I know I have these 3 strengths and I can play to that, then I can build on that. And that makes your department that much stronger.
Absolutely.
And that's really what it comes down to is I want these strong firefighters going in there and saving lives, not, wow, you can't move very well. Let's bash you until you quit or you're going to be crappy. So that's the
Right.
last thing on.
Yeah.
Same thing with athletics. I'm not going to go in there and tell a kid he sucks every day. Unless he's pissing me off, then I'll go after him a little bit. But other than that, though, now you want to play to their strengths. So I think that's a big thing. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, and it's use the strengths to treat the weaknesses.
Mhm.
You know, it's one of those that let them know that they're really good at this, but they really need to work on this. But sprinkle in that, you know, it's kind of a balance, if you will,
Mhm.
a balanced approach.
And we do the same thing when we did use the movement assessment we've done with your department, where we'll tell people straight up, like, where your limitations are, but this is where you can build on this and spend 5 minutes a day working on this, and you'll be 10 times better. It's
Absolutely.
you know, and we don't want to break anyone totally down because that's not why they're there. But
Exactly.
yeah, so that's kind of what we're working towards on that. And the programming piece is a whole nother topic I'm sure we'll get to, but that's a whole nother animal. Yeah.
And you hit on it a little bit as far as shifting the mindset of not breaking them down. Because even like 12 years ago, when you were going in, wasn't it just like break them, break them, break them?
Yes. It was like, how bad can I make it today? All right, now tomorrow is going to be that much worse than yesterday because we can't go easy on them. I mean, we got to make it tough. And also we went from a 5 to 6 week academy or a orientation, if you will, to now we're talking to 18 weeks where in 18 weeks, if you just beat on them every day, the attrition rate's going to be close to 100%. There's not many people that can endure just making it hard, if you will. It's a lot more than just making it hard. Yes, it's going to be challenging because that's what's going to make you better, but it's not just going to make it suck to make it suck.
Yeah, they just, from a sheer number, like bodies coming through the door, and the employable people and the general population is decreasing. Like you just can't risk the let's break them every day mentality. Right. It's a whole global thing that every profession is feeling, but especially in law enforcement, it's harder and harder to find the numbers that you need to make up for retirees or whatever it is. And so you need to kind of meet people where they're at, but still focus on making them better and making the unit better, making the team better. And how do we do that throughout that academy? The other topic we kind of already touched on, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper, is the injury statistics of tactical athletes. So the injuries that, if you just had to pick out of an assortment of injuries, like let's make it simple, like back, shoulder, knee, lower, upper, Where would you say?
For recruits,
Yeah.
with this class, it's been all lower body.
Mm.
Usually, though, it's back. It's almost always a back issue, and that's the thing that with our firefighters that are on shift, I would say it's 50% of the time it's back, and then they sprinkle in all the rest for the others. But this academy has been an odd one, and it's one of those that we're reflecting on and trying to figure out. We've had multiple ankles, had a couple shoulders here and there, but it's been a lot of lower body. But we've also changed our training plane where now we've actually been working out on a synthetic field. And I wonder if that actually, we thought it was going to be a good thing for impact, but I think that them not being accustomed to that has actually led to more injuries with us. So you're probably expecting me to say back, but actually with this class, we've actually had one back issue out of 30 people, which is pretty good in my opinion.
Yeah.
Now we're still grinding through the academy. There may be a few more, and we're not actually the workouts are no longer on that turf. So we'll see if the numbers kind of work their way back to where normally we're running into back issues is our most common.
That's interesting that you bring up the change in surface stuff, because in athletics, like we see that all the time. Like if volume changes too quickly and it's too much uphill and you've got shin splints all of a sudden, it's like,
Yeah.
well, I can tell you why it happened. So it's very intuitive and like introspective of you to at least be like, what do we not anticipate for this to look
Yeah,
like?
I'll be honest, I was blindsided by it.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, we're putting them on a soft surface. It's going to be great for any impact. It'll be pretty much absorbed, and it's not been the case at all.
Yeah.
It's just been odd. It's like, I guess we should just go run out on the pavement. I mean, probably their bodies probably would have been a little bit better. I don't know.
You just don't know, I guess.
Right? You
No,
don't.
well, I was gonna say is because I had the same issue working at a high school where we had kids going from a weight room that was synthetic like flooring to the concrete to the field turf to the grass, and every other kid's got shin splints. We took them off the turf, we took them off the concrete, and then got cut in half. But at the same time, I think to your point about the backs and the knees and ankles, like the way we do things these days, we're sitting down more. People are less active coming into those academies, whether they're coming from college, high school, whatever it is. So their bodies are not used to the way their hips are supposed to move. They're not used to the stressors. So then you're going to get all that kind of stuff. So
Absolutely.
their ankles and knees and hips aren't used to that. And like Beth said, their fat volume's higher than they've ever been through in their entire lives. And
Absolutely.
you can't prevent every injury. I mean, I bang my head against the wall every time when a kid gets injured or a person gets injured. I'm like, God, what could I have done differently? And I realized there's not much you can do sometimes because we can't cut a person open and figure out what's going on in there all the time.
Right.
So we just never know. And then there's nutritional sides to it. You don't know what they're going through. They could have just slept horribly and they're just not recovered. You just don't know. But I think to your point though, getting rid of those preventable injuries, those like nagging ones over the years or over the academies is the big deal.
Absolutely.
If you don't have ACL tears, you're not tearing labrums, you can kind of fight through some of those, but you're trying to avoid those massive ones. I think that's kind of the big thing.
And it sounds like your class has so far. This at least
So far,
so
far we haven't had any major. I mean, we've had stuff that was not controllable by a recruit that's ruled them out, but there's not been any injury that has ruled a recruit out to this day. But it's one of those that we still want to prevent those nagging injuries or those things, because now we transition from that workout facility where now they're on the fire ground and they're on the training ground, and now we're it's sets and reps of pulling hose, and this week they're throwing a lot of ladders and they're forcing a lot of doors and they're stretching or they're pulling a lot of victims out, where it's one of those we're kind of analyzing of they've got to get their sets, they've got to get their reps, but we also got to be cognizant of, all right, if somebody's had a lingering back, the one that we've had, if we start recognizing that fatigue with it, it's all right to call the timeout and say, you've got it to this point. We don't want you injured at this point in the academy. You were doing the rep correctly. We're going to pause it here, stop for today, and let them rest and get back at it tomorrow or something like that.
Yeah, and I can speak to at least the law enforcement side too, where they were just at academy where it was very controlled. There was the on and off of like a PT day, an ST day, a PT day, an ST day, an off day. And usually they all capitalize on that off day. But now they're at the range on uneven ground, running on gravel, kneeling on gravel. Like we know, and we can't see them for those 3 weeks because they're there 8 to 5 when we're available to them. So we know that they're going to come back to us with like some aches and pains that we tried to prepare them for. But man, there's just like, hopefully nothing big happens while we're out there. We just try to get them ready and get their bodies kind of ready for that kind of volume of activity, but some things you can't prevent. But I think it's just great that you guys have the mentality of like, well, let's not make something out of nothing either. Like,
Right.
let's prepare them.
Yep.
Anything else to add to the injury statistics?
No, I have a question for Chief though about, do you think some of these injuries or some of this like work capacity stuff would be, I think, improved if there was like pre-academy training for these guys?
Oh, 100%.
We've had that conversation.
Yes, we absolutely have.
Yeah, where like they get a 10-week plan or 8-week plan or however long it is before they
Mhm.
enter the academy. Here's what you need to do. Obviously, if they don't do it, that's on them. That's the way it is. But
Mhm.
it might give you a better chance, like I guess, if maybe it's 10 extra people that are that much more prepared. I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing ideas
No,
out there.
Beth and I have actually talked off the record of how important that pre-academy readiness, or whatever we end up want to dub it, that we wanted to do it actually with this current class, and it's just one of those that just slipped off the radar. But it's one of those, like you said, we can't force anything. We can highly encourage and highly recommend, and that alone would probably cut our injuries, if not more than half, because their body's already been built up to it.
Mhm.
Where when we hit the academy, this is the expectation, and we're going to hold them accountable to the form. But if it's 20 reps, it's 20 reps. And if you have to rest for 10 seconds in between every single one, that's what it takes to get it done. That's what it takes to get it done.
Mhm.
Where if they would have done the pre-academy readiness, that should be no factor. Won't have any worry of, when form goes, that's when injuries creep in. That would set them way, way ahead. And that's one that, moving forward, I may not be the training chief anymore that oversees academies, but that is something that our PFTs are going to be doing for our next class. Is we got to have some type of readiness program. It may start out very infantile at 6 weeks or 4 weeks. It's better than zero. But the goal would be is at least an 8-week plan. And my thought is 2 months prior to the academy. That's about the time conditionals are official and all those types of things. That there are some hires that they get notified 2 weeks prior and they show up. We only get 2 weeks with them. 2 weeks is still better than zero.
Mhm.
So yes, I couldn't agree more that yes, we would present. I don't want to throw a hard number at it, but I would say over half the injuries that are just those little ones that are really preventable, if you will, they would disappear.
Yeah, I mean, that's similar to the athletic model where you have to have the volume of work in before you go into those high impact situations.
Yes.
Otherwise, you will have those injuries, just kind of the way your body works. So,
Yep.
yeah, it's good insight there.
It sounds like you have another class to create.
I know. Every time we talk to somebody, it's just something else. Yeah.
Like a ramp program
Something,
for law
yeah,
enforcement
yeah.
and
Test it
fire.
with this department. That'd be fun. Yeah.
We're getting ideas as we go through
Yeah.
these. I love it. So, kind of along those same lines, structuring academy, PT, and exercise programming.
Mhm.
What is your approach? How do you do that? And I know sometimes, like first they're with you, and sometimes then do they always go to fire school after, or can it be the
Depends
other
on
way
the academy.
around?
Yeah, it really depends on the department. It depends on their academy. Our academies that we run EMS first. So they have 6 weeks of EMT class. So the way we approach it is that's our pre-academy readiness, right? So if we didn't get anything, it's going to be 6 weeks before they're putting on turnout gear. It's going to be 6 weeks before they're throwing ladders and all those types of things. And we found that it's at least a little bit of a benefit to get 6 weeks of structured PT. And I'll dive into the programming in a second, but 6 weeks of that structured PT where the first week, it's really an evaluation. Where are you at? Whenever I was leading the PT, I always wanted to know how long can they plank. And when I say plank, I want good form on plank. I don't want somebody that's got a teepee. I want to know what their core strength is. A core strength tells me a lot about a person. We would do a mile run for time. That just gets a good baseline of, okay, what's the speed runner of the class and what's going to be the person that we're going to have to really push along to keep at a good 9-10 minute mile pace. But throughout that week, there's strength pieces that would go in it as well. So we want to know how many pull-ups they can do when they start the academy. The last year's class, we actually started integrating bench press just to see where people were at, to see if we would improve. And it was a bit of a science trial, if you will, that we didn't bench press one time in the class. We did a lot of push-ups. We did a lot of sandbag work, but to show us and the recruits that you can actually improve your bench press without ever touching a barbell. So we integrated that last year, and it was one of those that I was a little nervous on it because I didn't want a shoulder injury over just doing a bench press. And it was one of those that we didn't. We put 135 on the bar, and if somebody struggled with that we had spotters and the whole bit. But the whole thing is for us is Those 6 weeks is a buildup. When we get to about week 4 and 5 of that, we start slowly introducing the fire gear. So we start out with just the coat and the pants, and we don't add an SCBA, and we integrate that once or twice a week. And then when we progress to week 5 and week 6, it's whenever, okay, now we want to start adding in next layers. So maybe an SCBA for one of the workouts, and then maybe we would add in everything, including their masks. That way, they're starting to live in their office, if you will. The one thing that we have stood fast on is we won't work out in fire boots. Fire boots aren't designed to be worked out in. We always keep them in exercise tennis shoes. Just one of those. Once again, trying to prevent those little one-off injuries that I don't want to run in fire boots. I don't expect a recruit to run in fire boots. But yeah, that's our approach, and that's the approach that we will maintain as long as I can see. Is the EMS comes first. It's really a build-up period for them. That if we do the pre-academy readiness, then we probably can start ramping our programming up. But that is a challenging piece with an academy or in general. Programming is probably one of the hardest things to do when it comes to physical fitness and trainers and that type of thing.
Yeah, I had so many thoughts while you were talking about just it sounds like football when they like do uppers only. Like what sport does that sound like, you know?
Yeah.
And it's, you know, how you like slowly put them in the gear, get
Yeah.
them used to it. I mean, if they're a shit mover before,
Yeah.
they're just going to get worse anyway, so you can kind of identify those weaknesses and fix for them, because I would say the academy on the law enforcement side that I see, the first 2 or 3 weeks is just education on movement, like how to lunge properly, how to hinge properly, how to breathe properly, and all those kind of things. But the one thing I don't see them doing all too often, at least early on, and it's probably just to get them used, well, they wear their gear all day, but like, you know, you get that back pain, you're sitting in classroom all day, you have your ballistic vest on, it's just the ache. You get
Yep.
the like
Oh, I
achies.
just can't get comfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
I saw this one thing. It was just a reel of firefighters doing this. And they're like, if you know, you know, because they had their SCBA
They're always
on.
shaking, yeah.
Could
Yeah,
you hear the
always
beep,
got to
beep, beep,
shake.
beep, beep?
Always got to shake.
So yeah, dive into a little bit of the actual programming then when they are in the thick of it.
Yeah. So programming, like I say, is probably the hardest thing to do because it's really a balancing act for us of looking at, you mentioned kind of volume. I look at it as demand versus their capacity. That's how I'm kind of programmed in my mind, is looking at the day of whatever it may be. Is that demand going to outweigh the benefits of any physical fitness? So there may be some days that half the day is a lecture, the second half of the day that, yeah, they are doing physical activity, but when we're done with the training side of things, do they have capacity left to complete a 20-minute, a 30-minute, whether it be strength, whether it be cardiovascular driven workout? And I'll be honest, that changes from class to class to class because everybody's always kind of at different points in the class. And I'm not going to call anybody out or pick on any classes, but some of the classes, you reach a certain point in the training for the day that they don't have anything left in the tank for the training, let alone the PT that we had planned. And that's one that you have to be willing to scale back. It's one of those that, I mean, we're 2023 now, that, it isn't old school military where this is what we are doing. I don't care if it takes us till midnight. We have to weigh the benefits of, if, yeah, we could have them do this physical fitness or this exercise, but is it really going to be a benefit? It's probably not,
Has the juice worth the
because it's
squeeze?
really, you're going the other direction at that point. We also, the other thing that comes into play for us for programming in our academy is our academy runs through the summer. So we are fighting dehydration every single day. This weather we have today is great for them. They're on cloud 9. 2 weeks ago when it was 94 and humidity was way high, they weren't even hardly doing anything, and all of them thought, there's no way I'm going to make it through this. But it's all part of that conditioning. But really, like diving a little bit deeper into programming is it's very hard to program for 2 people, let alone 30. So that's where you have to be a bit generic, but it doesn't take anything away as far as performance. So the movement is the movement, the repetitions are the repetitions, and really the factors that lead us one way or the other is all based on performance for us. So we may have a grandmaster plan of a workout and we think they have the capacity, but as soon as we start seeing all of their movement going to shit, then it's where we just stop it. And that's one hard pill for a lot of people in the fire service that are a lot of type A mentalities, that are paramilitary, that they will do this. And they will do this tomorrow when they're fresh, or maybe the day after that, whenever they're done. So that's been a tough one for us, all of our departments, to get through. Of, okay, yeah, we want to PT them every day, but we can't.
Mhm.
And especially, I mean, if we look at live fire, we just did live fire last Thursday and Friday. On Thursday last week, we did 28 live fires in one day. There's no way you can even think about doing PT. The instructors are more tired than the students probably by the end of the day. How are we going to say, yeah, you need to work out, but we're not?
Mhm.
And that's kind of part of the culture within our academy is if they do punishment for something, you'll see the Northside Fire Academy instructors doing punishment. And it's kind of a funny story. I'm going to pick on one of my own guys that's assigned to the academy. Is we have a rule is if your SCBA goes into full alarm mode, then you pay push-ups. And we were sitting there, and him and I were just talking, and sure enough, we're like, man, what is that sound? It's his SCBA went into alarm. And sure enough, push-ups are being paid. And another instructor sees it, and they're jumping in there. And it's one of those to show the recruits that we hold you accountable to form. We hold you accountable to whatever the drill may be. We're going to hold ourselves to that same exact standard. So a little off topic, but
No, definitely important to the discussion, because I think behind all of the buy-in to what you're doing or to what any agency is trying to do is the culture.
Mhm.
Because if the culture's shit, everything else is going to be the same, and it's just
Absolutely.
going to be like this contentious you versus them, us versus them mentality. Like, you're higher up in the food chain, so you don't have to do certain things, when really shouldn't you be modeling the way to like
Yeah.
set the tone for everybody else?
Yeah.
So I am a big fan of that. You mentioned something about like paying for push-ups, and we were talking about like injury themes earlier. And what I meant to mention, so I had a brain squirrel moment, like we actually go as far to track when injuries take place in like PT or ST or corrective action. And so then before every next academy, we sit down with the academy sergeants and the LT and the major and go over that.
Mhm.
So we can say like, how can we avoid this next year? And they hate it when they find out most of their injuries take place during corrective action.
Right.
So I'm like,
Yeah, it's
I mean,
true.
they did 100 burpees. I don't know what you
Right.
expect.
Yeah.
They're like, well, we're not getting rid of that. I'm like, all right, then don't get rid of it.
And then you're
buddy.
going to have injuries, right? And that's part of it, right? Is teaching a lesson worth
Yeah,
a
you
dinged
really
up
wanna
recruit.
know?
That's where you're really weighing the
I
options.
mean, I had something to add to that. I mean, if you're doing corrective action for something that they know is going to save their life, that's a different story. Like,
Right.
their air goes out, like
That's a big deal.
that you got to take a risk on that one. Like,
Right.
would you rather have them do the correctives and save their life, or not do? And they're like, it's not a big deal. And next thing you know, like their lives on the line. So
Right.
that's a different story.
Mhm.
From a sporting, you mentioned a few things. So the bench press part of that, there's gonna be a lot of coaches that watch this, or strength coaches like, oh, why does he bench press? Why does he do that? Like the YMCA bench press of just getting someone to get under there is a big deal,
Mhm.
because you can test someone's shoulder endurance, you can test their posture just for doing a couple reps, and then you can get an idea of, can they handle stuff in their hands. Like that's the running part too. I mean, you guys have to run, like not run essentially, but you have to get your cardiovascular system up.
Absolutely.
Your heart's not beating right, you're not going to be able to do stuff. So it's all that, because there's strength coaches and coaches in the world, as you probably know, they're like, we don't run our athletes, we don't do this, we don't do that. It's like, well, you got to do something for these guys. So and then also too, this managing the demands of what you're doing, that model is starting to follow in the sporting world, as you would know.
Mhm.
Especially in baseball, that the pitcher guy's throwing 100 miles an hour for 100 pitches.
Right.
He's not going to go off the field and start doing a bunch of stuff. He's going to do his recovery. He's going to wait till the next day to start it, whatever. So I think that's important for people to know. And just, we're not here to kill the recruit, like he's got to make it through. We want to hire this guy or girl,
Right.
whoever it is. And
Mhm.
you're investing in that person. If they recycle through, that's costing the department money, and that's a big issue. So
Absolutely.
that's the last thing you want. So I just wanted to add a few things to that.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really formal talk. More formal than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Usually Mike and I are goofing off, but I appreciate it. I think the last thing that I want to touch on, and hopefully I'm not putting anyone on the spot, but your tips you wish you knew sooner, your wellness tips you wish you knew sooner, are kind of like, don't do what I did. What would you tell someone
The obvious ones is, do everything with a purpose. There should be reason behind the madness. and really the other part that kind of goes really hand in hand with that is doing your research. That when I first started leading PT for my department back in 2015, I believe it was one of those kind of shooting from the hip. And I was going off of, okay, I know what I went through whenever I did my 6 week orientation. I'm going to play off of that, but try to, ramp it up a little bit. But then as I became certified and kind of started growing as a PFT, I really realized that all the information is really available to you. If you're willing to put in the effort to go find it, there's reasons behind why I say we do certain things or we don't do certain things. For the recruits, no, not necessarily, but other instructors, absolutely. That, hey, I'm a big fan of plank. I'm not a huge fan of sit-ups. Just my thing, and here's why. So those are probably my biggest two that I learned early on, because early on leading PT, I was not a PFT. I was not nothing. I was, hey, I really like working out, and they're like, hey, will you lead PT? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be there. But as I started to learn that, yeah, it's not just about kicking their butt. It's really truly about making them better, making them more prepared. And then my key to all these is I want them to sustain this for a career. Now, everybody's going to fall on and off the wagon. I know that. But if I can get them to sustain for at least 5 years of their career, how much better is their heart? How much better are they going to be full body wellness having that in their back pocket? So those are really probably the top two that stand out to me. I mean, I've done some silly stuff with recruits. I mean, everything from 100 foot of 5 inch and making 4 or 5 of them get on it and run with it. I mean, it's just crazy stuff.
Yeah.
That it was corrective actions.
Yes.
That it was just like, no, you're doing this, and or taking that same 5 inch hose and having them all get into a plank and draping it across their back. That it's one of those. I'm like, yeah, I probably didn't really need to add that load. It's just, the plank will give it. Just give it time. The plank will do its trick. Those are probably the biggest ones that stand out to me.
I just had a flashback to when I came out to PT that one morning before the world shut down. Do you remember that?
I
And
do.
Came out to that, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And there was a younger PFT kind of learning from you,
Yep.
and like kind of been through some hard stuff, and he was doing that where he was like pushing them to their. And you're like, it doesn't have to be as hard as you thought it needs to be. Scale it back a little bit. So I can see what you mean in that transformation of your own approach and mindset, probably.
Oh yeah.
To where it is now. So my question for Mike was performance pearls you've learned being immersed in the tactical setting now.
Oh, well, there's a few, but I think one of the biggest thing is the difference between being on shift and off of shift. That's the biggest thing. And what I've learned is, like you just said, we're going away from recruits now, we're going more incumbents, right? So when people are on shift, they still think they can work out the way they were off shift. It's like, no, you're on a 24-hour shift here. You don't know how many calls you're going to get. You don't know when you have to be ready to go. Like if you go mess yourself up in the gym and you have to go carry somebody, like that's not going to be good. So I think that's one big thing I would have people take away from this from a programming standpoint is know when, like you said, know when to back off, know when to push yourself, understand like, hey, my job's to do my job, not get my workout on to look good in the mirror during my shift. So, and then I think one thing that's going to start to take place in the tactical world, I think it should, is more of the kind of wearable GPS kind of tracking stuff. I know you can't wear some of those things when you're on shift to kind of know what you're doing, but there are ways to do it where you can track recovery. And now the programming for a PFT or programming for anybody in the academies, it's going to be a lot easier because you can be like, okay, this person didn't recover at all from that last workout. How do we adjust in real time rather than just kind of guessing on it?
Yeah.
So I think those are a few of the pearls I would throw out there. And that's kind of where the field's going in general, is how to track those things. And it'll just give you more answers on how to program. So that's how I'd say.
And the one I had for myself was approaching the whole person wellness model and breaking stigmas of weakness, working with tactical athletes, because there's the mindset of the ego and the like, well, I'm not hurt. I can't be hurt. I don't want to let anybody down. I don't want anyone to think I'm weak. I have worked on both sides of the fire and law enforcement aspects of what ProTeam does. And I think that firefighters, I'm painting with a broad brush, so no one like take me to the stake on this, but like are a little more in tune with their bodies. and are more willing maybe to speak up if they are injured. And I think that's because of the camaraderie they have in the house and the encouragement they have in the house, and like talking to their brothers and sisters about like what's going on with their bodies. And my police officers are in a car by themselves all day long and just sometimes don't have backup and they have to be dominant in everything that they show up to. So like to turn that off and say that I'm hurt or I'm injured, because there's a difference, is like hard. And they usually have a very skewed like even feeling of an injury. You know, it should hurt more, should hurt less. It's usually nowhere in between. But I think ultimately what you're explaining, at least that runs with the Northside Academy, is just trying to build a great culture, and hopefully it just kind of flows downstream. The new recruits and agencies that we work with, when we get their recruits in the door, only know an early and often mindset. It's just kind of like the tailoring the 30 plus age group who just didn't have the resources to something like what we're doing. But I think we just have to keep doing the work to make sure that they know it doesn't mean you're weak. It means that you're looking out for yourself and your unit or your battalion, because like you can't be hurt if they need backup or if there's a mayday or whatever their situation arises. And we're just going to keep talking about it so that it's normal. And beyond that, musculoskeletal health is like the mental aspect and all the things that you can find courses on ProTeam University. Shameless plug. So visit the site so that you can learn more from us. And we just really enjoyed the talk today and appreciate your time.
And the one thing I'm going to clear up is I'm not an expert of anything. So you
We
said
aren't
that from the
either.
beginning.
We
so-
probably should have said that. We probably should have said at the beginning, this is not the end all be all, like whatever. Yeah, I know.
There's a disclosure. This is our opinion and only our opinion, and we're representing ProTeam.
We are.
And that's all good. But thank you for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you next time.